Dear Makita community, I warmly welcome you. It's great to have you back. You've asked for it, and today the time has come. It's all about the overview and comparison video of Makita's 18-volt cordless impact wrenches. In today's video, we will thoroughly compare these devices to see where the real differences lie and, of course, to find out which of these impact wrenches is the best fit for you. Starting here on the right side with the smallest and super handy DTW300 up to the largest DTW1001 with a solid 1700 Nm of torque. So it's going to be really interesting. That's why I'd say sit back and relax. We'll start right after the intro. But if you haven't done so yet, make sure to subscribe to this channel and activate the bell to not miss any more videos. You can find the current prices of these three models in the video description below. Thank you very much for your support, and with that, let's get started after the intro. There they are, standing like organ pipes looking somewhat funny, the three most prominent 18-volt cordless impact wrenches from Makita. Of course, they're all functionally identical, but due to their different power classes, they each serve different application areas. As a private user, you typically won't be able to utilize these 1700 Nm fully. Still, the saying goes, better to have it and not need it than to need it and not have it. But honestly, I can't imagine everyone immediately getting the DTW1001, as it has some disadvantages, especially compared to this small and super handy model. Conversely, the question arises, what are the advantages and disadvantages between all these models? That's exactly what we will look at in the current video. So let's start right away with the names. What do we have here? On the right side, the smallest and most compact model, the DTW300. Right next to it, the mid-range cordless impact wrench, the DT700. By the way, this also comes as the DTW701, both of which are completely identical in performance, so don't be confused. And on the left side, the monster impact wrench, the DTW1001, or here again, there's the second variant, the DTW1002. Also worth mentioning, I've already presented each of these three impact wrenches separately in detail and then pushed them to their limits in practical tests. So if you've decided which cordless impact wrench it will be, definitely watch the individual video again. I'll link all three separate videos in the video description below. Since we have three devices with completely different performance classes, they obviously also have different housing formats and, of course, different weights, which naturally affects the handling and overall use of the tool. The question arises, what do I want to do with this cordless impact wrench? If I have to work with the device all day but only have to loosen small nuts, then the DTW1001 is probably way too overpowered. It's large, heavy, unwieldy, and has far too much power for this application. Conversely, if I have to loosen large nuts daily, I certainly won't be using the DTW300, as it is simply not designed for that. So I would say let's compare all three devices. Let's start with the size and weight. Let's start with the DTW300. As you can see, this device is ultra compact. We have an overall length of about 145 mm with the corresponding attachment, making the device very, very handy. I can really get into every corner with this cordless impact wrench without any problems. Next is the DTW700. As you can see, this one is a few centimeters taller, and in terms of length, we have about 170 mm here. So it's already getting a bit bigger and bulkier. And now, the monster, the DTW1001. Here we have an overall length of about 230 mm, and in terms of width or height, it also surpasses the DTW700. In this view, you can clearly see the size difference again. DTW300, DTW700, DTW1001/1002. Naturally, this also affects the weight. If I have to work with the cordless impact wrench for several hours daily and I have the 1001 in my hand, I will definitely feel it in the evening. Therefore, the lighter the cordless impact wrench, the better. Let's start with the weight comparison of these three cordless impact wrenches. As you can see, each has a large 18-volt 5 amp-hour battery attached. This ensures the same conditions. Let's start with the smallest in the test, the DTW300. Let's see what it weighs. As you can see, 1,800 grams, including the battery. So the DTW300 is definitely incredibly light and compact. Next up is the mid-range model, the DTW700, and it weighs just under 2,600 grams, which is 800 grams more than the DTW300. This means that the DTW700 is definitely no longer the lightest, but weight-wise, I'd say it's still manageable. And now the one that tops everything in terms of both power and weight, the DTW1001 with a solid 3,800 grams. The largest model weighs a solid 2 kilograms more than the super compact DTW300, and compared to the DTW700, it's an additional 1.2 kilograms. In summary, the DTW1001 is neither handy nor compact nor light. Besides weight, the handle also influences the handling. And here we have to say that all three handles are mostly identical. You can clearly feel that the handle on the DTW300 is a bit smaller than that of the DTW1001, but still, all are very comfortable, ergonomic, and, as you can see, also extensively rubberized and therefore non-slip. The most important controls on these three impact wrenches are also easily accessible, such as the forward-reverse switch and speed regulation. You quickly notice that the larger the cordless impact wrench, the more sluggish it is. The DTW300, the smallest in the test, is super precise and naturally designed for all fine tasks, while the DTW1001 is extremely sluggish in comparison. Right above the speed regulation, we find a built-in LED for illuminating the work area on all three models. These are automatically activated when you pull the trigger. As you can see, both the DTW300 and the DTW700 have double LEDs, just like the DTW1001. However, the LEDs on the DTW1001 are positioned on the right and left, not side by side. How does the lighting perform? Let's take a quick look. So, lights off. The DTW300, I'd say, is perfectly adequate in terms of lighting. The DTW700 gives essentially the same result. And now the DTW1001. Here's how it looks. As you can see, the LED on this model is much more centered compared to the DTW300 and DTW700. What else can we see on the front of these three impact wrenches? As you can see on these two models, the DTW700 and the DTW1001 both have large, black rubber coating on the front. This ensures that if you accidentally bump the cordless impact wrench against something like a wheel rim, it won't get damaged, but is instead protected by the rubber coating. The DTW300 has a similar feature, but it's made of plastic. At the very front, as you can see, there's also a fluorescent ring that glows in the dark. I still don't know what it's good for, but it also protects the impact mechanism. And very importantly, the built-in socket. As you can see, both the DTW300 and DTW700 have a half-inch square drive. By the way, the difference between the DTW700 and DTW701, as mentioned earlier, isn't in the performance or anything like that, but in the socket. The DTW700 has this friction ring, and the DTW701 has a retaining pin. Both, by the way, have a half-inch square drive. And finally, the DTW1001. As you can see, the socket here is slightly larger. We don't have a half-inch drive, but a 3/4-inch square drive. For those who don't like the 3/4-inch drive at the front but still want the high power, there are exactly two options. First, you can use an adapter from 3/4-inch to half-inch. The downside is that this adds another piece of metal, making the impact wrench heavier and potentially causing some power loss due to the additional connection. And option number 2, there's also the DTW1002, which has a half-inch drive. However, the DTW1002 has 100 Nm fewer breakaway torque and the 50 Nm less fastening torque compared to the DTW1001. So, you have to decide which variant of this monster model suits you best. What else is there to say? All three models have a brushless motor. The DTW300 and the DTW700 are XPT certified, meaning they're protected against splash water. As for the DTW1001 and DTW1002, I don't think they have this certification. Speeds and impact rates are, I believe, irrelevant. What is much more interesting is the maximum torque these tools can deliver. So now it gets interesting. What are the actual torque ratings? Let's start with the smallest, the DTW300. As the name suggests, the DTW300 has a maximum fastening torque of 330 Nm and an impressive breakaway torque of 580 Nm, according to the manufacturer. Moving on to the next size up, the DTW700, it boasts a fastening torque of 700 Nm and a breakaway torque of a hefty 1000 Nm. And now the DTW1001. Here we have a fastening torque of, as you might guess, 1050 Nm and a breakaway torque of 1700 Nm. Incredible! You could say the DTW300's power is sufficient for most applications. The DTW700 is always a good choice, and the DTW1001 is simply over the top. What else is there to see? Let's move to the base of the machine. As you can see, the DTW1001 and the DTW700 have been nodding their heads the whole time. This is because these two models have a coupling at the bottom which dampens the vibration of the impact wrench so it isn't directly transferred to the battery. This feature is likely relevant at this power level because the DTW300 does not have it. Nevertheless, the smaller DTW300 is significantly smarter in comparison if we take a look at the control panel at the bottom. You can see that the control panels of the DTW300 and the DTW700 are largely identical. Only the older DTW1001 and DTW1002 deviate from this pattern. Starting with the largest model, the DTW1001, you can see it has just one membrane button and three LEDs labeled S, M, and H. These three LEDs represent the preset speed or torque levels. We'll discuss these three levels in direct comparison shortly. Let's first look at the other two models, the DTW300 and the DTW700. As mentioned, their control panels are mostly identical. Each has three membrane buttons, multiple LEDs, and several modes. With the DTW300 and DTW700, we can select multiple speed levels. Specifically, there are 4. Additionally, there's a mode button on the right, allowing us to choose different modes, such as a bolt release mode. Compared to the DTW1001, the control panels of these two models are significantly more complex. However, I won't go into detail about these features in today's video. Simply watch one of the recent videos, either for the DTW700 or the DTW300. And finally, as promised, here are the fastening torques of these three cordless impact wrenches based on the different speed levels. Starting with the first level, the DTW300 delivers 100 Nm, the DTW700 151 Nm, and the DTW1001 a solid 300 Nm. In the second level, we have 160 Nm, 200 Nm, and the big one, the DTW1001, gives a solid 600 Nm. In the third level, the DTW300 delivers 210 Nm, the DTW700 gives 320 Nm, and the DTW1001 reaches its maximum performance of 1050 Nm. These two models, the DTW300 and the DTW700, have a fourth level delivering a maximum torque of 330 Nm and 700 Nm respectively. I would say that looks pretty good. Now we can move on to the practical test to see how significant the differences between these three models are. You must understand that I can never fully test the power of this model, let alone the bigger one. But still, let's see how significant the differences between these three units are. So let's get started with the practical test. We now start the comparison test of these three 18-volt cordless impact wrenches from Makita. Starting with the smallest, the DTW300 with the large 5-amp-hour battery for maximum power. Next up is the DTW700, also with a fully charged 5-amp-hour battery. And finally, we have the largest, the DTW1001, also with a freshly charged 5-amp-hour battery. Here you can see the impact sockets used, all identical, and just to show you briefly, the procedure throughout the test. I will always tighten 4 nuts and then loosen 1, indicating the torque for you. The first torque is set to 209 Nm. As you can see, it's no problem for all three impact wrenches. So let's go a bit higher, 278 Nm. Again, all three impact wrenches handled it very quickly. The next torque setting should be interesting. 381 Newton meters. And here the DTW300 struggled a bit, but yes, what can I say? It managed it just like the other two. Next torque setting, 443 Newton meters. Yes, and even here the DTW300 definitely struggled. It took a bit longer, but what can I say? All three devices handled it effortlessly. So let's go a bit further to a solid 542 Newton meters. Now it's getting interesting. Yes, and again, the little one definitely struggled. I thought at one point that it wouldn't get the nut loose. Let's move on to the next test, 658 Newton meters. Yes, and I would say that's it for the compact one. No problem for the DTW700. Yes, and the monster DTW1001, as expected, got it loose within a few seconds. Now let's test the fastening torque. Tighten the nut for 5 seconds and then loosen it. Yes, friends, now I'm curious about the torque we get here. DTW300, the smallest in the test, 536 Newton meters, a decent result. DTW700, 548 Newton meters. Interesting. And the DTW1001, as you can see, I can't get the nut loose anymore, so let's let it loosen its own nut. And even here it took a second or two to struggle, and the nut is loose. Truly amazing what this device can do. And with that, I would say it's time for the final verdict. I would claim that all three cordless impact wrenches performed spectacularly, but clearly, each device has its own application area depending on the required power. Nonetheless, I would argue that all three impact wrenches required more or less the same amount of time for low torque ranges, let's say up to about 400 Newton meters, even though the DTW700 and DTW1001 are significantly more powerful than the DTW300. If not, rewind the test a bit because you could really see this well. Why is that? Simply put, the larger the impact wrenches get, the more sluggish they become, and you can especially notice this when comparing these three models. This means the DTW300 is super compact, super handy, and super precise and responsive, whereas the DTW1001 takes its time to build up its full power. Especially in the higher torque range, you quickly notice which cordless impact wrench really leads. But I would say that the performance of the DTW300 and the DTW700 is completely sufficient as well. And now it's your turn. Which cordless impact wrench would you choose, or have you already made your decision? Feel free to write it in the comments below. I'm curious to know. Also, if you enjoyed the video, show it with a big thumbs up. And if you haven't already, definitely subscribe to this channel now and activate the bell so you don't miss any videos. You can find the current prices of these three cordless impact wrenches to support my channel in the video description below. Many thanks for your purchases through the affiliate links. Take care and see you next time. Until then, goodbye.